Chapter 6 Final Reflections. Now it is all about algorithms. Algorithm is the new concern. There is a rising concern about the destructive side effects of the new gods of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. When we first embraced these tools as our means for enhancing communications, we seldom saw them as a potential source of addiction that may ruin lives. Here is a case in point. If I had tweeted my Aunt Mary's bigotry about Pastor Helliger's procreative skills in the Pomeroon, it would not only be alive today, but continuously shared as a standalone comment all over the world. As it stands, you only knew about it by reading my confession in this book, and Dr. Helliger, the pastor's son, can only come to know about it by doing the same. In my days, one's only concern with how history will treat you was limited to whether history will ever know about you, and more so, what history will ever remember about you. The legendary economist John Maynard Keynes once wrote, I quote, "Practical men who believe themselves to be quite exempt from any intellectual influence are usually the slaves of some defunct economist. Madmen in authority who hear voices in the air are distilling their frenzy from some academic scribbler of a few years back." End quote. He was saying that we are all mental slaves to some defunct thinker. Yesterday, the guiding principle was think before you speak. Today, it is think before you tweet. Nick Clegg, Vice President of Global Affairs and Communication at Facebook, wrote a brilliant piece on the phenomenon of algorithms. These are his observations. In a recent article for The Atlantic, Adrienne Lafrance compared Facebook to a doomsday magazine, a device built with the sole purpose of destroying all human life. In the Netflix documentary The Social Dilemma, the filmmakers imagine a digital control room where engineers press buttons and turn dials to manipulate a teenage boy through his smartphone. In her book Surveillance Capitalism, the Harvard social psychologist Shoshana Zuboff points a picture of a world in which tech companies have constructed a massive system of surveillance that allows them to manipulate people's attitudes, opinions, and desires. In October 2021, the Finance Minister of Trinidad and Tobago portrayed his budget speech as one designed to bring this country into the digital age. It is only now, in the age of digital communications, that we are starting to come to grips with the power of algorithms. So what is the big fuss about algorithms? And how is this linked to digital communication? Why is it so easy to unconsciously slip into less helpful behavior on social media that may lead into anxiety and depression? A particular internal report for Facebook in 2018 explicitly stated, our algorithms exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. It warned that if left unchecked, the platform would push more and more divisive content in an effort to gain user attention and increase their time on the platform. You remember my earlier concession to the utility of mathematics in economics by saying that mathematics helped economics to bridge the gap between fact and wisdom. Well, it did so with the power of algorithms. What are algorithms? Here is a simple way of understanding what an algorithm does. A traditional algorithm takes some input and some logic in the form of a code and comes up with an output. We do this all the time in applying economic logic to planning problems. What happens when the algorithm takes an input and an output and creates a new logic, which can then be used with new inputs to give us a variety of new outputs? Let me show you how this works. Remember the situation I explained earlier of working with some passion fruit farmers to arrive at a price to sell their produce to the juice canning company? Well, what I had given them was an algorithm that started with an input price and then invited the buyer to propose a quantity. The algorithm then used their initial price and his new quantity offer to come up with a new price based on accepting his quantity offer. What was going on was an algorithm that was using the input of price and quantity to come up with a new calculation, serving a different purpose that was not explicitly on the table, namely the combination that would give them their highest profit level. It is not the solution that is the real focus. It is your goal in solving the problem that matters. I can create an algorithm to help someone more effectively handle his problem with depression. But if the purpose of the app is to increase the number of times that person hits on my website, the mental solution may get lost in the pursuit of creating repetitive behavior and website profits. In essence, this is what Facebook was being accused of doing. A whistleblower complaint filed by an employee alleged that Facebook misled investors and the public when it said that it prioritizes meaningful social interaction through its algorithms. The complainant claimed that Facebook actually promotes polarizing misinformation and hate speech. The claim was that in the priority on contents, Facebook prioritized content that would lead to more hits on its website over content that would destroy social interaction. Reflecting back on my past, I possibly learned the importance of employing algorithms in economic solutions back in my PhD candidacy test, when I had so successfully applied Pontryagin's maximum principle in determining investment levels in front of my doctoral committee. Little did I understand how my thinking would have evolved. I was no longer destined to become slave to the thinking of some defunct economist, but rather to the application of algorithms in economics. The principle in play here is that the case is not considered to be solved until all of the boundary conditions are simultaneously solved. So if he chose a price, you make it a conditional quantity, and when he chooses a different quantity, you propose a conditional price. The corporate water responsibility. Recently, we have witnessed a global shift in investor sentiment with respect to purpose and contribution that large corporations can make to society. This is now becoming an issue with respect to corporate use of freshwater supplies. There are 3 global industrial sectors that need to be observed with heightened scrutiny with respect to freshwater. These are the oil and gas sector, the metals and mining sector, and the electricity sector, primarily the hydroelectricity project. A modern version of corporate responsible behavior now claims to bring people and resources together to build a better world. Corporations want to create social value by contributing to people, the environment, and communities in ways that are impactful. The Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, is a not-for-profit charity that runs a global disclosure system for investors, companies, cities, states, and regions to manage their environmental impact. Its aim is to make environmental reporting and risk management a business norm, driving disclosure, insight, and actions towards a sustainable economy. Since 2002, over 8,400 companies have publicly disclosed environmental information through the CDP. The CDP had noticed that the majority of respondents to its 2013 questionnaire, 63%, had begun to set concrete targets and goals focused on reducing water use or increasing water recycling reuse. CDP not only asked companies to report their physical sources of water, but to consider the quality of surface water upon which they depend in terms of fresh and brackish surface water, and also whether they withdrew from renewable or non-renewable groundwater sources. These distinctions helped companies to disclose their risk exposure from different water sources. For example, an electricity utility organization may use large volumes of surface water for cooling purposes, but the water quality may not be fresh, and that lowers their risk exposure. This means that CDP seeks more nuanced information than volumetric reductions in freshwater removal or consumption. Most important is the need for large companies to have robust monitoring and accounting systems in place for all aspects of their corporate hydrology, and to demonstrate an understanding of their dependence on freshwater supplies. There are a few truths that have come to light because of this type of reporting. First, a company cannot effectively manage water risk or appropriately account for water access in its growth strategy if it only focuses on its own operations. The CDP has warned that companies that continue to pursue a narrow focus could be missing potential opportunities and overlooking other serious risks. Take a look at the Australian oil giant operating in Trinidad and Tobago, BHP. Globally, BHP employs 72,000 persons in 90 countries, accounts for $93.5 million in social investments in 2019, and has expended US $400 million into a climate investment program to accelerate its efforts to address climate change. BHP admits that the environmental challenges it faces are complex and unprecedented. They demand concerted and collective action to reduce their impact on water resources and biodiversity and to curb carbon emission. As a major producer and consumer of fossil fuels, BHP has now acknowledged a responsibility to take action on climate change to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, but not by itself. Relating corporate water risks. In March 2021, BHP sent out a request for consultancy services to compose a Water Resources Situation Analysis, WRSA, in Trinidad and Tobago. BHP thought it needed this information to help it set internal action targets informed by a catchment basin level water risk assessment so that BHP can improve its water management. BHP also wanted to support collective action water targets informed by this WRSA, which would be made available to the entire population. BHP correctly sought to position itself to contribute towards solving a priority shared challenge. Here was BHP seeking a prescriptive approach to managing its water risk in the face of a deteriorating water situation in Trinidad and Tobago. Actually, this approach had already been formulated back in 2013 by Deloitte and Touche in an algorithm that went like this. First, start out with a no water strategy, in which actual or perceived water scarcity is not acknowledged as a salient issue and all resources are treated equally. Then move to an efficiency strategy where water scarcity is now recognized as a driver of costs. Costs of acquisition and use of water are now considered. Then formulate a risk strategy in which the risks of water scarcity are managed at the facility or business unit level, but not consistently at the enterprise level. Stakeholder engagement is pursued to improve access to water, and in some cases on an ad hoc basis. And finally and hopefully, arrive at a license to grow strategy in which the need to manage water scarcity is converted into a platform for growth. Internalized externalities, for example water and ecosystem, can now be considered as external issues. My concern was that such a process can be initiated by an enlightened manager, but it can be easily reversed by new management. I wished to see an irreversible process that can be tied to some sense of maturity in corporate risk management over space and time. The corporate maturity S-curve. I have been working on this idea of a corporate maturity S-curve. First challenge on this learning curve would be to identify a decision base for corporate water risk management that cannot be easily reversed. I chose to base my approach upon the concept of maturity, which once learned is not reversible, or at least it should not be. And you feel you have matured in your management processes, you can't easily reverse that level of maturity. As such, on one axis, I have a progression that goes from immature to mature right up to sophisticated risk management decisions. On the horizontal axis, I am implying a progression of innovative solutions through time and space. These go from avoidance through mitigation, rehabilitation, right up to compensation and value control. Now, the essence of this algorithm is that it takes into consideration the boundary conditions that will themselves change and alternatively impose changes on the corporate risk behavior. Stage 1. Acknowledgement of a water crisis. This is the stage at which the company's management believes that this is an internal issue, impervious to the water situation in the rest of the economy. Besides the normal PR campaign of social responsibility, the company's avoidance approach is most likely to reflect on it as having a profile of non-responsive business processes where water is concerned. Stage 2. Process awareness. The company gets internal audit reports that establish the internal water management metrics. These are the type of data reported to CDP. It may seek to mitigate the obvious deficiencies by identifying process management and governance structures that can carry some mitigation measures. Stage 3. Inter pares observation and control. The company starts to reach out for a more mature level of water risk management. It starts to realize that some of its more forward-thinking competitors are starting to make direct links between water use and production challenges and are executing alternatives driven by optimization techniques in real time. Its managerial staff begins to craft and redo processes across enterprise, their supply chain, their trading partners, and their customers. Stage 4. Inter-process observation and control. The die has been cast. We are now seeing monitoring and surveillance measures aimed at realigning the water management process with market strategy. Stage 5. Water Value Control. This is the stage of sophisticated water management. The company has built a business performance framework that dynamically links water valuation to business operations. At this level, water utilization is synonymous with water stewardship. The company now defines its social responsibility as serving as the starting point for creating a formal process to actively engage stakeholders in the areas where it operates, leading to the exchange of critical information on shared water challenges and solutions to improve water management and increase resilience. The company has joined the battle to create strategic space. Algorithms and intervention logic. In the last 2 years, the world has been engrossed in two major existential challenges: the coronavirus pandemic and the effects of global warming, although the latter preceded the former. We have seen very good responses to both of these in the form of the development of the vaccines and the prolonged discussion at COP26 in Glasgow. We may be entering a period in which a new existential challenge may arise every year. We cannot afford to be reversing ourselves because a subsequent management team has a different understanding of our physical reality. Science now allows us to establish the facts, not to arbitrarily choose alternative facts. The way in which we talk about water issues will significantly affect the way we design the solutions to address them. It will also affect the extent to which our institutions, our practices, and our actions are perceived to be legitimate or illegitimate, to be legal or ultra-legal. Creating more strategic space may require us to learn to apply more complex algorithms to an already complex life situation. As a parting memory, we should always remember the wisdom of the ancient sage from Timbuktu, Ahmad Baba, 1556 to 1627, who, in praise of the search for knowledge and the intrinsic worth of scholarship, had rightfully proclaimed in the Timbuktu manuscript 776 that, and I quote, "On the day of judgment, the ink of the scholars will be measured against the blood of the martyrs and found to be weightier." Thank you.